Appreciate that we've got quite a wide and varied audience this morning. Many of you may already be on Evolution MX. Some may be using the Evolution M product. Others are using our Evolution product, or somebody referred to it quite affectionately, first generation. And then there'll be other people who are using non-integrity products such as Zero or Sage. So I appreciate that there's a wide audience here. The requirement for the business analytics is to be on the Evolution MX platform. So for those of you who are already on it, this will be a familiar looking screen. Evolution M remains the bedrock to this system and is fully accessible through the menu structure you can see down the left-hand side. What we've really done with the analytics and business dashboards is we've put them over the top as a kind of a framework over the top of the main system. And that enables you to do important personalized reporting and analysis to your own requirements. Now, the full system is available through the menu structure, and in there, as with any integrity or other based system, you will have access to standard reports. So those are the standard reports that Evolution M has for some time and will cater for most needs. What we're talking about this morning is going to be the business analytics side of things, which is your ability to create your own reports or tailor the reports that are suggested to you. Now, this analytics function is available to users on browser access. So it means that you can share the system or access to the system across a multitude of different platforms, desktops, laptops, even tablets with just browser access. So from an iPad or a Galaxy Tab, whatever it may be, you could allow somebody to have access to the analytical functions only. Not full processing, but then you possibly wouldn't want that to be the case anyway. But it does mean that you can be opening up the opportunities and allowing for far more self-service of the information from workers out in the field. Within the system, then we've got options to go into the different modules, but I'll just show you a couple of highlights really initially with the use of dashboards. Now, dashboards are essentially a collection of analytical elements, which we'll go into in a bit more detail in a minute. This is showing me an example of the purchase ledger where I have got some headline figures being represented. I've got some graphical representations of information. I've also got some shortcuts down towards the bottom here. These are shortcuts to other options, meaning that you could be operating from a dashboard environment solely without necessarily the need for menus, and you could then collapse or shrink the menus and run purely from a dashboard, because you could get access to the functions should you have a license to be able to do it, as well as be able to see that key important analytical information. Now, also from dashboards, you could access other dashboards. So an invoice register tile there, for example, will take me across to another dashboard. So again, another reason why you could do away with the need to have menu access, because you could be leaping around from dashboard to dashboard. An invoice register, whilst that's not the subject of today's webinar, there is a separate webinar for that. That's your means, incidentally, of being able to receive invoices via email and deal with them electronically, rather than having to do any printing, barcoding, or scanning side of things. This dashboard just gives me a summary of what needs to be done in that particular area, what has been done, what's in query, what's in progress, and so forth. So that could be a good way of checking that information and also drilling down to the detail to allow for further processing. Now, the information that's being displayed in the other tiles, the graphs, for example, is summary information where you have decided how that information presents itself. On the top 10 outstanding creditors, for example, I could at that point drill down on that. So whilst initially the information is being shown in a bar chart, when I drill down to it, it's then displaying the information in normal tabular format in terms of the table of figures side of things. That would allow us to be able to see then the more evidence behind the figures, allowing us to expand upon a particular supplier, for example, seeing all of the transaction information that's outstanding for that particular supplier, and even allow us to drill down to the underlying image. Using the paperclip option there, I can click onto and see the image associated with that particular posting. Now, other dashboards are available throughout the system, obviously. You can decide how many of them there are and what content they have. Within the subcontractors, for example, we've got an example there of the reminder for insurance or actions outstanding. So insurance due to 11 subcontractors. Click on that and you can see a report of those 11 subcontractors where the insurance expiry date has reckoned to be met already. In fact, the text beneath that says that the insurance has either expired or is expiring in the next month. So that means you can set that as a criteria to be observed on an ongoing basis. So every time you open up and look at your particular dashboard, you'll know that there's that action to be taken. It's not a case of having to change the date criteria every time yourself. Okay. Also in the system, we've got access to some things like purchase orders. So that could give you key graphical information representing what you spent with different suppliers or what products have been ordered within the lifetime of the purchase ordering. You could, of course, set criteria on here to say, I'm only interested in stuff that's happened since the 1st of January, for example. So as well as graphical information and, again, shortcuts, as we've seen already, center of the screen there, I've got access to my order due lines where I could click into that to see everything that's outstanding or due within the next 7 days, as we've got criteria there. So that's showing me 84 purchase order lines are due on that basis. I could then take the option to filter this information, because this is an analytical report at the end of the day that's been designed to meet your particular requirements. If I chose to, just be using a column heading there, I could filter it to say, well, I now need to know what I'm expecting in terms of steel columns across all my different contracts, or maybe there is a particular job that I'm interested in chasing up on. So you could limit the display just by filtering the information to give you more meaningful data to support any activity you need to follow up on. Okay, also there we've got an example on the plant side of things. So plant could be a combination of hired in plant as well as plant items that you own. This is giving us a nice summary of any activity in terms of charging or profitability that's been earned across your different plant items, as well as the top left tile there is giving me a summary of items that are on site that we reckon ought to have been returned by now, because when we issued them to site or when we ordered them for site, they were given an expected return date, which has already passed. Now that can give you a drill down there to show you what items are out on site and should really be on their way back or having been returned. And this is showing you a combination of some hired in items. The top 4, the bottom 3 are all to do with those that have been owned by the company. So they're just being issued from the yard to be used on contracts. Okay, I will show you an example in a moment of how you can configure and set up your own dashboards. But for the time being, I want to go underneath the surface here really to show you what is the background to the dashboards, and that's the analytical functions. Hidden within each menu, we do have access to the analytics functions. So within Purchase Ledger, I've got an analytics submenu there. If I go into the example I've got there for purchase transactions, that will now display for me the purchase transaction information in my chosen format. So I have got here the same as we saw instantly when we drill down from that graph, where we're able to see summarized the values on a particular supplier. Expand upon that and you'll be able to see the entries beneath that. If you prefer, usually right click as an option within the column headings, and you could say, well, I don't really need to see it grouped, so I'm going to take the option to ungroup that. Interesting use of English language there, say ungrouped, and that's now showing you all of the transactions for all of the suppliers. You've got a notice there on the outstanding has got a filter on it, so you can use filter icon there to apply rather than just having to use column headings to filter. You could go into the filter and you can see there I've got the outstanding value has been set to be not equal to 0. You'll notice there's lots of permutations as to how you can do comparisons on fields, and those don't necessarily have to be fields that you're using on your report. They are fields in the database, so you can yourself see the different breadth of options you've got there for not equal to, less than, doesn't contain, differs from, and all sorts of different things. So you can set that as criteria within your individual reports and then know that that will be applied every time that particular report is run. We've also got formatting applied here as well. So you can see that I've highlighted in red a ruling that says when it's the status on a particular transaction is deemed to be on hold, it has colored it differently. And I've done that using another of the icons on the toolbar. Click into that. You can see there, same idea. I said where the status on the transaction equals on hold, then I'm actually taking the option there to change the coloring there to use a color palette choice. So that could be on the text and or the background. So it can really breathe life into your reports and make it more meaningful and more evident when certain rules have been observed that need to be taken a notice of. This same information could be grouped in a different way. So I've got a field there for year period, an interesting field. It's not just the period, because obviously if you're dealing with multiple years, there's a danger that everything that's been seen as period 3 in whatever year could be lumped together. So we are recognizing it as a unique combination of year and period. And I'm going to take the option here to just use right click in the column headings and say group by year period. So I can now see in whatever order I want information relating to my outstanding creditors on an age basis. Now, at this point, I may say, well, I've made a significant change to the way that this report looks, so I actually want to save it. And I'll just, at the moment, just take the option to override the existing report. And it's available now to all users as opposed to just being one of my own. So if I just save that, that will now make it available for future use. You can also have your own chosen version of the events made as your chosen favorites. So with that same data, you can see I've got about a dozen different ways of looking at it, including that creditors tile option that we saw earlier, which I was using for the dashboard. So you can, on an individual basis, say that if I access the option from a menu, I'm going to flag up whichever of those is my preferred choice. So because that one currently isn't, it's giving me the option to do it. The one we were looking at before, the outstanding group, that already is my home choice. So that's going to be the one to referred to. Okay, other options we've got. If I go down the list here, we've got into our subcontractors, looking at the analytics area there. A straightforward option here, really just to show subcontractor information, where you've chosen the fields that are to be included in the report. I could now use, again, another of the icons on the top there just to click on and say, well, I want more fields than are currently being shown. And it'll be heartening to know that down the left-hand side listed for you are fields that kind of make sense. They're not technical gobbledygook as to what the field represents in terms of the file structures. It is a meaningful representation of what the field holds. So you can identify in alphabetical order those fields that you might want to include. So if I just add some bank details, for example, to that, that will add them ordinarily to the far right of the screen. It's up to you if you want to. You can drag and drop them somewhere else. You've got options to resize columns as well, allowing you to get access to a full screen of information. Drag the information over if you want to, rather than having to resize individual columns. Again, right click option here would allow us to say we can auto fit all columns. Okay, I also chose there to just click on a particular column which has done an sort on it. So you can sort information on any column just by clicking on any particular one. So it could be type of account, for example, get all my labor only subbies at the top. Use a shift and select will do a second sort. So if I were to now sort with my shift key holding down, just click on the insurance due date, I'll be able to see sorted within the already category for account types, all my labor only at the top there, showing me those with expiry date further away than those that are past their expiry. So lots of options you've got available there. You could then, if you wanted to, do a grouping subsequent on that, group by account type. So now you can see all your labor only subbies, expand on them to see their insurance as opposed to having to look at them all at the same time. Okay, also in there we've got formatting options, as we mentioned earlier. So let me just ungroup that again so we can get all the data back. If I wanted to, on the formatting, I could say I want to apply a new rule in terms of formatting. So I'm going to add an advanced rule where I'm going to pick up on the insurance date. Okay, and I'm going to say it's less than or equal to, rather than putting in a particular date, which I could do, I could say it's going to be so many days from now. So if I look at everything that's going to be due within the next 30 days or is already overdue, incidentally, then I can say to the system, that's what I want to consider. All of the fields on the report are being shown. You can select individual columns if you want to, as you saw with the on hold option I had, or I'll just say, let's pick several of them, and I'll apply a text coloring to all of those fields together from the color palette. Let's just select the red one there, save it. And if I apply that now, that will give me a more meaningful report where you can see now more clearly those subbies whose insurance has expired or is expiring in the next 30 days. Again, if I want to, I could, let's just close that dialog screen, save that. This time, rather than overwriting what I've already got, I could say, give it a new name. So let's call it insurance due as another option, save that. That now becomes a new report added to the list. And I'll take the option on this occasion just to flag it to say that's my preferred way of looking at it. So when I call up that option from the menu, as a user, it knows that I want to see that version of events as opposed to anything else. Okay, other things that we can do, if I go now into purchase orders, for example, I've got quite an interesting report in there. One I get asked for quite a bit is being able to consider buying history or purchase order history across different suppliers and products. So as an example, on the menu, buying history is the report I've chosen to call it. And in there, we can see we've got all purchase order lines being considered. I've grouped here now by supplier, so you can see an expansion capability on each individual supplier just to show the purchase order lines there. And the red coloring has been applied here in instances where the system has detected that there was a variance in price when it came to invoice based upon what the purchase order was raised at. So here, for example, on Wolseley's account, we have actually invoiced 10,650. Based on purchase order pricing, it should have only been 10,376. So there's a £274 discrepancy. And as you expand upon that particular supplier, you'll be able to see individual instances of when that happened. So further down, we've got concrete, for example, was invoiced at 500, should be 480. So it's easy and to spot those kind of price fluctuations. If I chose to, I could use the same basis of this report, just ungroup the information initially, and then maybe say, I want to look at a particular product code only. So let's use a filter there to say, let's have a look at SCOL. That's now showing me all instances of SCOL across all suppliers, all contracts, 63 records in total being shown in the top right there. I could then take the option to click on the order date to sort that. So I could now see what's the most recent price I've paid. In fact, I could say, let's have a look at it only in relation to column contract 0737. So now you can see the most recent price as opposed to how it's varied as time has moved backwards. Okay, so interesting to be able to get easy access to that kind of information, which I'm sure you all know is in there. It's just always quite a bit difficult to be able to interrogate and get access to that kind of information quickly and easily. Across the financial side of things, I've got an example there in terms of the nominal ledger where we can combine different analytics reports into the same screen. So not quite a dashboard, but more of a multi-tile reporting option. Here, I've got a nominal browse option being displayed. So what this is doing initially is it's showing me 3 separate reports all in one screen. I've got a list of my cost centers or departments, top left, a list of my nominal accounts, top right, and the bottom section is all about the transactions that relate to those nominal accounts and cost centers. Now, at the moment, I'm seeing every transaction for every account. So 6,500 records are being shown. What I can do from these kind of screens is do interactive selection. So if I clicked on Southern, for example, as a cost center, notice at the bottom, I now get a filtered list of only those transactions that relate to my O2 cost center. If I similarly do a selection on the top right, I could use column headings to identify the account I want to go to. If I know where it is, I'll just browse down to it. And I'll now see that that combination of materials for the Southern division has resulted in 1,042 different transactions. At the bottom here, I could take options to, as you saw me before, right click on the column heading and say, let's group by year period. That then allows me to see a more summarized view of what's been happening. Again, I could sort that. These are 3 separate reports, so they can each be saved individually, depending on what your changes might be. If you now choose to browse around on the system, I could click to my labor account, for example. Just watch the bottom section now, automatically follows suit and says, well, these are now the transactions grouped because you grouped them on the previous instant for that particular account. And you could look at any particular record there, expand upon any if you want to, and then when you go back to another account, it will recognize the expansion that you'd already performed is still present there on the alternative account you selected. So it's very interactive in being able to compare against different accounts, for example, on different accounting periods. Okay, within the contract side of things, which is largely going to be where most people are going to have most interest. Again, analytics here allows us to go into all contract transactions as an example. So anything that's menu item listed here has been added by me. You can do that yourself. You can change what we've offered as a selection to you. You can add your own options as well. And of course, you can restrict who can go into each individual menu option. So within the cost heads area here, I could say I want to do a selection or a filter on a particular cost head. So not looking at all cost transactions, a particular cost head has had 17 occurrences across a number of different contracts. I could also use date filtering. Again, a bit of an annoyance within normal reporting is once the report's run, that's pretty much it. You've got to accept it on that basis. Whereas here, we could be saying, let's have a look at a range of transactions that go up to a particular date. So just by putting in a date filter here, I could say, let's okay on that one. And then the system will filter and say, you've only had one instance that's gone up to that particular range. Doing the other way around, I could just say, well, let's take the date filter up there and put it into the other one, Control V. That's showing me the alternative. And again, if you save that, that could be saved as the date range you've put in. As before, you have options to say, rather than putting a date in, you could say it's from the last 90 days ago, or whatever moving date criteria you want to have considered. Now, also on this particular example, we can see that as well as standard data available to us, we've got custom fields or calculated fields. So my cost plus 15% isn't a standard database field. It's something I've added in. When we went into our add fields previously, we had a further option there for tools, which would allow you to go into the customization, where you can see any number of fields that you've added in, whether they are mathematical calculations, you've called the field a new field, you've involved standard fields and done maths on it, and you can then use that field on the report or as a result or as the basis for another calculation going forward. You can also use SQL select statements, any SQL syntax yourself that you might be familiar with. So it's very flexible to be able to get this extra information in rather than having to take the information out to Excel and then do the calculations there. Talking of which, if you ever do want to take information out to Excel, there's always a tools menu and export as out to Excel. So that's never going to go away. People are always going to want information in Excel. The fact, I suppose, that we've got this available as a browser means the instances of needing to send something to Excel could be far reduced, because if you're allowing people to access this information themselves in the field from a tablet or an iPad or a laptop, then they can access real up-to-date information, which they know isn't out of date by virtue of the fact it's already been sent to Excel. Other thing just to note there, which might be of interest to some, within the data, we have the ability to recognize multi-company. So I've got a company option there at that point, which can show which transactions I've got on a particular company code. Recognizing that if you have got multiple companies, you could potentially be reporting upon multiple company information together, or filtering and saying, I only want companies 1, 2, and 3 on this particular report, whatever your choice might be. Okay, a more meaty report within terms of the contract is within contract performance. That is allowing us to see not just cost transactions, but also across the board. So I've got information relating to costs. I've also got budget information. I've got outstanding purchase order values. I've got the cash paid out in relation to my costs, as well as the revenue recognition as well. And I've used conditional formatting here to highlight a whole line here in green, where the rule of profit margin being greater than 0 has been recognized. So not great news in much that only 3 of my jobs are making money, but at least it's something very evident to people as soon as they click onto the report that they can see that's the case. In fact, I've got multiple rules being observed here. The red line is showing a contract that's over budget. An orange one could be saying a contract has used 90% of its budget. Now, summary information as that is all well and good. Getting into the detail of it can be achieved through drill down on these reports. If I click into the actual cost, I can go down a layer to show me how much of that cost was related to materials, for example. Click again, and we can go down into our individual costs, where again, I've chosen here to group them by cost head. That's your choice as to whether they are grouped or not. So it's 3 reports in one. Each can be tailored by you and can be saved separately, accessible as a drill down, one from the other. Okay, we can also combine certain elements as well. So on my contract side of things, let's just go to a contract dashboard. So my contract dashboard could be looking at all contracts, all information relating to them, whether it's purchase order values, costs, budget, performance figures, and the like. And I could take the option here to filter that and filter that on an individual contract basis, and then the system would rewrite the screen based upon that filter. Or I can combine the analytics functions with the dashboards. So if I go to my contract list here, I could say, well, I'm interested in seeing more information about the Linwood Warehouse extension. Double click it, and I've told it to go to a dashboard and filter that dashboard based upon my contract code selection. So that's now showing me quite neatly all information relating purely to that contract. So I could drill down on the costs. I could drill down on any of the tiles of information there. I've also got access to contract documents here, which is a great way of being able to access the document management library. Again, that's not really the subject of today's webinar. We will be looking at as a separate sessions and subjects, but that would allow you to go into and see all of the documents that were sitting alongside a contract, all in one place. And bearing in mind, this could be your contract managers who are accessing this on a remote basis, where they've got browser access to be able to get into the system. So your choice as to how that happens. That would also give us a quite nice, neat repository for them to be able to drag and drop new documents in as well. So you have the option of being able to do that without being a full user of the system. So it could just be something that allows them to be able to get into and to documents of their choosing. Now, within there, we could see documents that relate to site forms, for example, where you've had incidents or accidents that are being completed. Those will automatically appear within your contract section. And not only will they be documentary evidence, but they can also provide valuable analytical information as well. So using instance as an example, we could look at not only the documents themselves, but also instance analysis. So the data that's been collected on those forms can be shown now as reporting data. So you can see here that on all incidents across all time, I have lost 6.5 hours. I could filter that, as you've seen me do before, say, let's have a look at only job 0737. That could then filter on that basis. You could put in date filters and so forth. So the valuable form information that can be collected, and again, we can look at that as a separate webinar. We've got a pre-recording of that already. That would allow for the forms to be collected, provide us document evidence on the contract, and then valuable reporting that you can perform your own analytics on. Okay, so that's a bit of a whistle stop tour. I did promise earlier that I was going to show you how you can compile your own dashboards. So currently, I've got my introductory screen as just a pretty drab corporate image in the background. What I can do is, using the toolkit options, is I can turn that into something a bit more functional. So I just need to tell the system, what are you actually going to do at that particular point on the screen? So on that particular menu option, I'm going to say, let's use a dashboard option. So I'm going to add that from my toolbox. And if I then save that, come out of edit mode, that will then give me a blank dashboard to work with. So I can go into the settings. I could go and change the title of it. And maybe I want to call that my company KPIs, for example. I could change the coloring on that. So rather than being white font, which will probably disappear into the background, I could choose something a bit more vibrant. I could even put an image in the background. So rather than having the plain blues you've got there, if you want to nominate a image file that you have, then you could just input that detail there. Okay, say OK to that. I've now got a blank dashboard with that same image screen in the background instantly. Using the tools top right, plus tile would allow me to say, right, I need to add a new dashboard tile to that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go to my menu structure, and I'm going to pick up on something that I've already designed as an analytical report. So I can go through my menu structure. Let's on here go into subcontractors. And through my analytics, I'll call up my subcontractor option, the one that you saw me where I put the insurance details highlighted in red. Which version of events do you want from that particular area? So I could choose whichever one I wanted. Let's choose a graph, one which has been represented in graphical format, and I'll choose its sizing as well. So let's just make it large. I'll allow for drill down as well. So we're saying through this run menu item, do you want to allow for drill down? You may or may not. If you do, then you can say, where does it drill down to? Typically, it'd be the same area it came from, but it could be in a different format, as we'll see in a moment. So that allows me to have a tile. Let's add another one where I'll do a similar thing, this time looking at maybe the supplier side. So you can mix and match across the different modules to enable you to get a more meaningful company-wide structure. So if I go into my supply balances, pick that one up. Again, I'll choose what version of events I want in terms of supply balances. So we could say it's a pie chart this time. I'm going to say, again, it's large just to match the size of the other one. And I'm going to choose the option here to refresh every 10 seconds, again, allowing drill down. Do one more, add a tile there. This time we could be looking through the contract side of things. So let's go to our contract analytics and call up on contract transactions. There, I'm going to nominate something suitable for a dashboard, which is going to be more figures. Select again the sizing that you want. No refresh option this time, but again, drill down enabled, and OK. Come out of edit mode to save it. You've now got a fully functioning dashboard. So that would be your home greeting screen as you access the system, with summary information being displayed across a multitude of different ledgers, with that middle tile, as you can see, refreshing every 10 seconds, just to draw through new information which might have been added since you last landed on this particular page. As we saw, you have the option of drilling down. So I have enabled drill down here. So the graphical information is being displayed as the summary tile. When I click down to it, I can choose that information to be displayed differently. So more in terms of figure work, where I have got it displayed in alphabetical order initially. You might say, well, you prefer it to be in balance order. So sort it, save it, and that then becomes your default when you access that particular tile drill down. From here, if you wanted to, you could access the total balance on a particular account, display then your choice of transactions. Again, similar to where we looked elsewhere, we've now got all the outstanding transactions for that particular account with, as we saw earlier, the ability to click into document images and be able to retrieve those. Now, all of this functionality, you've seen me operate on a laptop, which has also got the capability of using the fully functioning areas of Evolution MX. But as I mentioned earlier, it's for analytics and dashboard purposes, it need only be browser access. So you could be quite happily accessing it on an iPad or a Galaxy kind of tablet device from wherever the individual users may be. So I do hope that's given you a useful overview in terms of what can be achieved in terms of more personalized and tailored analytical reporting. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention this morning and look forward to speaking to you all again at some time in the future. Thanks very much.